Welcome to the Andrew Holland Podcast, where we explore the stories of successful people, get insight and advice from individuals who have accomplished amazing things, and dive deep into understanding ourselves as human beings. Now, here's your host, Andrew Holland.
Hello, everyone, and welcome to another episode of the Andrew Holland Podcast. Joining me in studio today is Monique Porras, the founder and CEO of the Kempington Group, an executive and advisory searching service company.
Yes.
Monique, thank you so much for joining us and welcome to the Andrew Holland Podcast.
Oh my gosh, thank you for having me.
So your story is incredible. You were born on the West Coast, but don't remember living there. You grew up most of your time on the East Coast. You were in television, wanted to be the newscast anchor on an international channel or one of the main cable networks. Then you went to radio, and now you're in recruiting.
Right. Like, how does that happen?
How does that happen? So take us all the way back. Where were you born and raised? What brought you to the East Coast? How did you get into journalism? George Mason University.
Yes.
Bring us to today so that we get a good understanding of how you got to where you are.
Okay, perfect. So yes, I was born in Los Angeles, California. My dad is actually from there, originally grew up there. So we were out there and I was born there. Yes, I do not remember living there at all. And through his job, we got transferred. So funny story, we made a quick pit stop in Memphis, Tennessee. The reason why that didn't last very long is because I was maybe 2. My dad came home and I ran to him and I was like, Daddy, I fell down and hit my head with the thickest Southern accent. My parents were like, we got to go. So they got transferred over to New Jersey.
Because of the accent, they said, we're getting out of here.
We're out. Literally, that's the story. And so we go to New Jersey, which I'm like, that's so much better. To have the Jersey accent, but get to New Jersey, and then which is where I always say learn how to talk in New Jersey. Lived there for some years, and then
although you guys have a strong accent on the East Coast as well.
I mean, it's strong, and it comes out on me too. Don't you worry. It might during this podcast.
No, I'm from the Midwest, and everybody tells me I have an accent.
Yeah.
Of course, we don't hear ourselves.
That's right. That's right. Crazy thing is, I actually hear myself sometimes, and I'm like, oh, let me stop. But then from Jersey, went to the Washington D.C. area. Where I went to high school, college, lived for many years after. And, but yes, my degree at George Mason University.
What did your parents do? What brought them from place to place?
So, my parents have such a fascinating story, just beautiful, beautiful human beings and totally inspiration for me even to this day, right? From a work ethic perspective. But my mom worked for the United States Postal Service, early on in the years when she was in LA. And then my dad also worked for the United States Postal Service. At the time, he started off as a clerk. And literally worked his way up to CFO for the United States Postal Service. So DC is their headquarters. New York City is a regional office. And so, that's how
Your dad was the CFO of USPS.
Yeah. And he's as humble as he can be. And he won't tell people that per se in small talk. But yes,
that
he
is so cool.
Yeah.
How long did it take him to go from the bottom from the ground all the way up to that position?
You know, I'm going to butcher the years. He'll probably kill me for this. But like, I think 38 years or so. It was, he ended up retiring from there.
And about how long was he the CFO for? Do you remember? Not to put you on the spot.
No, you know what I know? Should I know this? No, I don't remember. But it was some years.
Yeah,
it was
fair amount of time.
He managed like a $60 billion budget when postal was postal, when people were mailing. And it was heavy mail.
I remember, so when I got out of college, CPA by trade, I went to Ernst & Young, and one of the audits out of St. Paul, because I was working out of the Twin Cities, was the U.S. Post Office. And I don't remember what portion of the audit they threw me in. I was a staff auditor. And I just remember seeing the numbers and the conglomeration of everything going on just at that facility. And then you take it up to corporate, and I'm like, mind blown.
I still, even to this day, I really want him to write down a lot, just from like, how did you manage that, right? And that was before cell phones. Before we were always connected constantly, right? How did he do that? He traveled the world. He was the one raising the stamp prices. 1 cent, 2 cent that everyone would get so mad about. Through the whole postal shootings, culture from way back when, he had to manage all that. And, just to watch him as a child, and then obviously growing into adult, I still carry that the work ethic and the things that I saw him accomplish to this day. Like, it's fascinating. But to see my parents both, I mean, grow in the postal service and do their thing. And, my mom came from a very, very small rural farm land town
Mm-hmm.
in Alabama. And so, very different pathways they both lived, right? They grew up very differently. And so to see them kind of converge and make that work, yeah, it definitely defines me today.
Well,
For
and
sure.
it's I see this in a lot of the guests and entrepreneurs, that
Mm,
is, where did they get that drive and that
yeah,
work ethic? And it's usually someone from their childhood, whether it's their parents, aunts,
yeah,
uncles, grandparents, and you have that exact same
yeah,
scenario.
yeah. They came from nothing.
So did you know, going back to George Mason
Yeah,
University, you're growing up in Washington,
yep,
D.C., which is an interesting place to grow up just because of, we didn't even talk about the political side that your dad had to deal with. And of
yes,
course,
yeah,
everything in D.C. is political, the USPS not being excluded to that,
yeah.
budgets and this, that. Did you know you wanted to be in journalism as a child, or did you gradually realize this is what I want to do with my
Yeah,
life?
it was gradual, right? Like, it definitely hit me in a gradual way of realizing I want to be an anchor. I mean, in my
Okay.
mind, I wanted to be an anchor.
Okay.
And so, I loved watching. My parents always had the news on, 60 Minutes. And to this day, my dad still always has the news on every day. 60 Minutes, I remember watching, and of course, all the news stories, right? And I loved it. I loved what the anchors were doing. And so that's when I got into George Mason, I decided that's what I wanted to do.
So you're going to major in broadcast and
Broadcasting.
journalism.
Yep. Yep.
Perfect.
Exactly. And so I loved it. I loved doing that when I was there in school. And I did graduate, early. So I was able to, start working at a local television station. So it was News Channel 8 in the Washington, D.C. market. And here I am in like this top tier market, right? Like, wonderful. I am like learning the best or surrounded by the best, watching my dad kind of do what he would do. I mean, he would be on C-SPAN and all these things, right? And yes, that political climate drives so much in news, right? In Washington,
Mm-hmm.
D.C. And so, I mean, I could not have been in a better market, right?
I mean, if you're in journalism and you're already in DC, that is
I
the
know.
place to be.
But I knew that wasn't going to be my plan, right? I knew they were going to like send me off to some third tier market,
Yeah.
right? And I would have to be a field reporter and do all those things. And I actually was doing field reporting, and also a futures editor, so picking future stories as well, but doing the field reporting. And so it wasn't quite where you could just sit behind a desk.
Yeah. Wait, so you didn't want to do field reporting in Washington, D.C. and then get sent to Lexington, Kentucky to do field reporting? Monique,
No,
come on.
no.
What's wrong with you?
No, I was like, please don't send me. I would always say that. I'm like, they're going to send me to Paducah, Kentucky. So it's funny you said Kentucky.
So you are doing this. And at what point did you realize, I mean, there's no way to escape being sent somewhere else, which you had identified you did not want to
Yeah,
do?
yeah.
How did it transpire that you ended up in radio?
Yeah, a neighbor knew a GM at a radio group. And so kind of I gave my name and I connected with them.
Mm-hmm.
And so, yeah, I had an interview and it was for the sales side of radio. So naturally, you'd think I'd go for the voice
Mm-hmm.
part of it,
Yeah.
right? And it was for a company called Shadow Broadcast. It was a Westwood One affiliate at the time, and it was like all the traffic reports. So as we know, DC traffic is like top one of the worst in the nation.
Mm-hmm.
Still was then, and still is today. So traffic was heavy, and so the advertisements around it were a big deal. And so started off as a sales assistant, doing kind of all the Arbitron numbers, listenership from like 18 to 49, women, what stations do they listen to, and all those things. So really started from the ground up on the sales side, but it fascinated me. So I always say my world of sales and exposure started in radio advertising, which I think is a great place to start. It's hard, it's brutal, and there's a lot of information to know and a lot of things to manage and massage, right? And so, I mean, I literally was like the youngest national director of marketing on that team, which was very intimidating, but I was surrounded by the best.
You didn't have a problem going from reporting to sales?
No. I'm naturally a people person. I'm naturally a hustler. I'll tell you, in college, I had a job at Guess. And so, right, just selling. and in Tyson's Corner, which is an area in the Northern Virginia area, which is brings a lot of international travelers.
Okay.
Guess is a brand, right? The international travelers love. And I was literally competing top 1, top 2 of the and I never had a sales job ever before that, selling in the retail space
So it's
at all.
natural for you.
I think it was
comes
just
naturally
natural.
for you.
And I think I realized it then.
Yeah. Yeah.
Right. So there's an art to it. And I was doing it in radio.
So that was your first exposure to understanding the importance of demographic information. Because in radio, it is all about demographics.
100%
as you
right.
talked about, age, gender, income, everything.
Yep.
That's because the people that are advertising on radio are trying to get to a specific target market, depending on the product. Everybody has a different one.
Yeah.
Little did you know that you would end up using that so much at the Kempington Group in your future.
That's right.
But before we jump to that, so you're in radio for how long? How long were you in journalism and broadcasting as a field reporter in DC?
I mean, it wasn't long. I mean, right? I started, technically I was still in college. So maybe like a few years. Like it wasn't long. And then moved into radio, did that for a couple of years. And then with the whole shift in the radio industry, that's what we all left. And that's what made us, like, someone told me, go into a recruiting firm and they'll help you find a job. I'm like, okay, what's a recruiting firm? Had no idea.
So you were seeing the writing on the wall that radio was becoming, the internet was creeping up, radio was becoming less and less dominant.
Well, for us at that time, it was really the venture capital world.
Okay.
Silicon Valley, like way late, like late 90s, early on, it was where they would order all these radio sponsorships, but then not pay the bill. So then they changed how we got paid in the industry. And radio campaigns could be like a year, could be 6 months, right? We're not going to wait that long. I mean, I was like 21, I was 22 or so, I wasn't going to,
you need to survive. Right. Yeah.
So, how do we work through that? Well, we all kind of like just left.
Yeah.
And so it was really the effects of the venture capital world that affected us really at that time.
So you have a friend that says, hey, you can't find a job or you want a job, go to an executive recruiting firm. Yeah. They'll help you find a job. Yeah. Tell us the story.
Walked in there.
This is in DC.
Technically Reston, Virginia. Yep. Okay. Walked in there and, I didn't know anything about them, how they can help, but I just felt like they were going to help rescue me. And I guess in a sense they did. If you think about it, fast forward.
You didn't know how, but.
Right. So I remember the manager of that branch, it was a national recruiting firm, actually became international at some point. Offered me the job to work there. I knew nothing of recruiting.
Wait, so you're going in for a job?
Yeah, I'm going in for them to get to know me, that they can help me find a job externally and like advertising, marketing, right, was what I was focused on. And they end up hiring me, offering me the job.
For their company? For
their company.
Okay.
So I said, I know nothing about this world. And I said, yeah, I'll help you out. I'll help you guys out until I find something. And that's all she wrote. That's it. I was there. I was in the world of recruiting.
And how long did you stay there? How did you get to Arizona?
Yeah.
And tell us how you ultimately decided to start the Kempington Group.
Yeah. So, I did that for a couple years and it was tough. I mean, we didn't have all the digital luxuries we have here today, like the technology, right? So it was amazing. It was, to me, like fitting a puzzle piece together, right? Because you're making these matches and it was difficult and hard.
You couldn't just look them up on their LinkedIn, see what they like, where they've been. You had to hustle.
That didn't exist. Yep. Yeah. Yep. And so, did that. And then I just had this in my head. I wanted to move. I ended up having a son in that time frame. A single mom, actually. And I wanted to move to warmer weather. So I was originally looking at Florida. And I had no family there. I just hung out in Florida. I was kind of young, like thinking, oh, this is where I want to be. So it was actually my LA family that suggested Phoenix. So I looked into Phoenix. I actually came out 4 times. It was hotter than hot.
You must have come in the summer.
Yep. Yeah. And I was reassured that it is very nice most of the year, right? Bought my house sight unseen. And, I came from a very expensive area. And so Phoenix at that time, I moved here in 2005, was like, what? You could buy all this house, right? So my son and I moved out here. Funny story with that is I'm on my one way out, right? I have my one way ticket to BWI Airport. And I get a call on the way to the airport from a recruiter from an international recruiting company. They're looking for an associate partner, is what they called it, for the firm in Phoenix. And I was like, wow, you cannot make this up, right?
How did they know about you?
Well, I had put my resume out,
Okay.
right? And because it screamed recruiting for just the couple years at the place I kind of stumbled upon and got that role. Yeah, I guess I was qualified in their mind. They wanted to interview me. I just think that was just ironic that it was on my one way.
Yeah.
Out.
So you didn't have a job coming out here. You figured I'll figure it out.
Yeah, I was like, you know what? I'll be fine. I never worried once. I'll be fine. I'll figure it all out. Interview with them. I mean, literally get the offer before my furniture arrived from the East Coast. So, yeah.
So you start with them.
Start
They're
with
a
them.
big international recruiting firm.
They're a big international recruiting
firm. How long are you
firm.
with them in Phoenix?
For 4 years.
Okay.
Yeah, for 4 years. And then the recession came, 2008. And so everybody's going, right? Either getting let go or leaving. And I remember it was down to myself and maybe just a couple others in the firm. And it was actually my boss's husband that was like, hey, come into technology sales. Now, one thing in recruiting is you can get siloed really easy, right? To just be accounting and finance, just be technology, right? Or just be sales, recruiting, what have you. And so I knew that I didn't want to be siloed in one thing. So when he said technology, I'm like, tech is indestructible. It's always going to be necessary. And so again, repeating history, I didn't know anything about it. Here's somebody who believed in me. I was like, hey, teach me the ropes, right? So sold managed services in technology for 2 years.
So you were out of recruiting for a while.
Out of recruiting.
Completely out of recruiting.
Completely out of recruiting. I had a friend, though, that owned a boutique firm, and she had been courting me. And I told her, look, when I go back in recruiting, I will come work for you. Let me kind of just do this. And technology is interesting. It's male dominated. There's not a lot of females.
Yep.
Also, me sitting across the table from some of these CTOs, CIOs, they're thinking, what do you know about technology? So I always felt like I had to prove myself.
Yeah.
So that just makes me hungry even more to learn everything I can. So I'll walk in that room and just kill them with my knowledge.
Like a lot of entrepreneurs, when someone says you can't do it,
yeah,
that makes you even more motivated to do it.
You're more determined.
Were you tired of recruiting at this point? And so that's why you kind of went into technology sales? Were you burnt out?
That's a good question, Andrew. I was not burnt out. I think what was happening with the economy and the recession, right? And you realize how impacted recruiting is by the economy, right?
Yeah.
I mean, it is, when it's a great economy, right? It's going to be the first to get affected. And if it's a bad economy, it's the first to get impacted, right? So I think I was like, wow, shocked at how it impacted it so much. But I was hungry to learn more. In my mind, I thought I would I would get back into recruiting and then take the additional technology knowledge and do something with that.
Okay.
So I was in accounting and finance recruiting at the international group. Yep.
Okay.
Yep.
So you do technology sales. You like it? You hate it? How do you feel about it?
You know what? I liked it. It was cool. It was interesting. Like I said, it was always seemed like an uphill battle, right? Because I was a female. I didn't know much. But then I was learning, and I mean, thank goodness for the people that trusted me and worked with me, that they did teach me so much. It was fun. It was fun. And it was a learning experience. So I would never change it.
So why'd you leave?
So I left because that friend that had that recruiting firm, I felt like 2 years, I got enough knowledge to take it back to recruiting. And she had been asking me. She had just kind of been interacting with me on it. And I'm like, I'm ready. So
this is a boutique firm now.
It was a boutique firm, yeah.
You're going back into recruiting.
Yep.
For those who maybe don't understand the recruiting process, give a sense of what that means. What do you do now in your own company, the Kempington Group, on a day-to-day basis?
So recruiting, to me, I look at it maybe a little bit differently than some other recruiters, right? For me, and I'll tell you, as they breed us, so to speak, in the recruiting world, it is very much about numbers, productivity. That's just been the history of the industry. But I am such a people person, and it never sits well when you look at it, a people business as numbers, right? So, if you ask another recruiter, they'll probably answer your question differently. But for me, the process is first and foremost about being honest, about being open with people. You're selling an opportunity, right? And not only are you selling an opportunity, but on the other side of it, you're selling a person, right, to that opportunity. So call us matchmakers, people, headhunters is still used, whatever you want to call it, but it is about making a match and about building a relationship.
So a company comes to you and says, Monique, I need your help finding a new CEO, CFO, whatever the position is.
Yeah.
And you take that and say, okay, we'll help you fill this role. Your revenue model is they'll pay you a certain percentage of the first year's salary in this role. It can be all different things.
Yep.
And then you go out into the marketplace and you find people that are looking either to transition their jobs, maybe they're a current COO and they want to step up to CFO or CEO, or they're just coming into the workplace, depending on the nature of the job you're trying to fill.
Or not looking at all. And you got to sell that opportunity to convince them to leave.
Which probably happens more frequently than anything, right?
That's right.
And then you marry the two.
Yes.
There are a lot of recruiting firms out there.
That's right.
A lot.
All right.
Why do you think, or what do you think you do differently?
Yeah.
That stands out why your clients from both sides come to you.
Yeah. Thank you for asking that. I kind of to my point a little bit, right, of changing the culture of the industry, right? It's not a number. It's people. I will always preach that our commodity breathes, has emotions, right? Our commodity is people. So leading with that, because that's very different than if you sell a product that sits on a shelf or another service, right? And so we do sell a service at the end of the day. But anything you read on me, Andrew, I will always talk about, the human side of it, the human factor, humanizing it. I'm also a people person. I'm also I literally absorb and appreciate the stories that I get told every single day, the stories of the opportunities, the stories of the organization, the stories of the leaders in the organization, right? And also the stories of the candidates. So how we can be stronger by selling that story. And so, some of the people that know me well in the Valley will, kind of chuckle, like, your story. I'll always ask, what's your story? Even if I meet you at a bar, what's your story?
Yeah.
Because I think that answer is so much better than, what do you do for a living?
Yeah.
Okay, follow me, walk me through your work history.
Yeah.
No, the stories are so much more impactful. So how can we make that exchange, do what we do every day in recruiting through the power of the story? I've been saying it for quite some time. I think where we do things differently is that first and foremost, but I think also is, I always chuck this up to my East Coast roots. I'm going to be direct. I'm going to be transparent, and honesty to me is huge. So how do we do that and be transparent with it, right? Because nothing fits perfectly. That puzzle piece I talked about that I love so much, trying to put these pieces together in recruiting, nothing ever fits exactly because it's people.
Yeah.
So how do we exchange the information, both sides, the opportunity side, the candidate side, where it just may not be picture perfect.
Yeah.
But where, as companies, can they give people the opportunity and the chance and the pathway to grow and succeed? And then where can candidates from the company side, right, learn more, absorb more, prove themselves, right, be in a position where they could grow themselves? And I just think doing it that way, more honest, more holistic, more organically is what I will say. I just think makes companies stronger, makes the people stronger, which therefore impacts our economy.
Yeah.
I just think it just needs to be done differently, because it will always bite us, kind of, I say, in the butt later, if you try to fit someone in a role where it doesn't make sense. And so many recruiters know it doesn't make sense, but they'll still do it. I get it, because there's pressure for numbers.
Yeah.
But I don't stand for it.
Well, and that's how they get paid.
That's how they get paid.
You get paid when you fill a position.
Uh-huh. That's right.
When your incentive package or your incentive structure
Mm-hmm.
is incentivized to fill positions, whether they're a perfect fit or not.
Yeah.
Not that every fit has to be perfect. That's how, that can lead to bad behaviors or poor behaviors.
Right.
That's in so many industries.
Right.
So you're working at a boutique firm. This is 2010-ish.
Yeah.
Tell us how you decided, it's time. I want to be an entrepreneur. I want to run my
Yeah.
own company.
So I was there for 4 years
Okay.
at that boutique firm. And so I remember once in 2007, I was still at the other firm, the international firm, going to my dad and was like, I think I want to start my own recruiting firm. And my dad's more conservative in the sense of like, from an entrepreneur standpoint, right? Like, no. He was a corporate guy, right?
Yep.
And so I told him, he's like, no. No. But something with the way he said no was like, maybe I'm not ready. So fast forward,
Uh-huh.
I'm in the boutique firm and I took about, I don't know, I felt like I just was almost ready. I wouldn't say ready when I started the planning. So my boss, the owner of that boutique firm, had kind of exposed me to a lot of things with the business. I looked at operations numbers differently, right? We were exposed to that, analyzing those, right? Goals against actuals, all these things, and lawyers and all the stuff like she had me a part of. Well, I'm kind of learning from all that every time. So I just kind of had this thing like, why am I giving up so much? Am I ready now? And so it took about 10 months of research of what I had a Fab Five. That's what I call them. Experts from East to West Coast that I leaned on for those 10 months. Built a business plan. I took my time, really laid it out, thought it through, and had it all ready. And
then you decided to make the plunge.
It was definitely done there. I went the next day and went to the Arizona Corporation Commission. Back then you had to go there.
Yeah. Now you can do it online.
Yes, right. Walked. So almost 10 years ago, walked down there because I had everything ready.
So you had done all the preparation and planning. And so you weren't terrified or scared.
I was not. People ask me that all the time. I wasn't. It was, I think being prepared really helped. And I'm still a single mom at the time. I'm still head of my household. It had to work. Yeah. There was zero chance and a choice that it could fail. That was not an option.
Yeah. And when study any founder in the past, necessity is the mother of invention.
That's right.
So when it can't fail, it doesn't fail.
It could not fail.
Which we could talk about that topic on why some people fail and some people don't. And we will get into that a little bit later. But I want to talk about hardships because when you were a sophomore in college, correct?
Yeah.
Your mom passed away.
That's right.
Tell us, there's nothing more devastating in life than losing one of your loved ones, particularly your parent at such a young age. Yeah. Tell us how you got through that and how you think it set you up for success to be an entrepreneur.
Yeah. So how I got through that, I was a caretaker, right? So when anyone has a family member with a disease such as cancer, right? You have different roles. I was literally a caretaker. My dad and I grieved differently, and I've never been upset about that. It's okay, right? Like that's okay. And so I was going to school, and in between classes, my parents lived 2 miles up the street. That's the reason why I went to George Mason. My mom, that was her. She had cancer before, went into remission. It came back, and I wanted to be close enough. Although they made me live on campus, right? I had to do all those things, but I was close enough to get to her. And so when it became terminal, I was taking her to the doctor's office. She was on oxygen. Cancer had gone into her lungs. And so it was going to class, coming back, driving her to the doctor's office, coming back, feeding her, going back to class, coming back, feeding her again. And my dad was working hard. He was still working and traveling. Had to be very, very hard for him to see the love of his life going through that. Yeah. So I'm proud of the role that I took. Instead of bitter or upset, proud of it. To be there for my mom, who was basically took care of me, right, when I was a baby and growing up. So, I was a part of it all. I was a part of shopping for the casket as if we were shopping for a car. All the preparations, I was there for it. My parents didn't exclude me from it. So I think there was resiliency being built, right? Yeah. My mom made one request And she said when she was passed, that I do her makeup. Of course, you're like, yeah, I'm going to do your makeup. Yeah, yeah, yeah. I don't think anybody, let alone a 19-year-old, thinks through what that possibly is like.
Yeah.
Because when have we ever had to put makeup on a corpse?
Yeah, exactly.
And so I remember being alone in that funeral home, in that room, doing exactly what she wished me to do. And I did it. I did it off of some sort of, I will never know what to describe this. Adrenaline, I don't even know the best word to use, but some sort of energy allowed me to do that.
Yeah.
It took me a very long time, years, for like society, whoever knew that story, to tell me that is like a story, right? Like
Oh,
that alone is a story. It was normal to me because mom asked me to do it.
very few people
Ah,
could do that. And I think that is a testament to your willpower. And I think it is also a testament to how you have been able to be as successful as you are. Because if you can handle, well, not only the death of your mom as a sophomore,
yeah,
but doing something like that because you knew it's what she most wanted,
yeah.
everything, professionally speaking, literally everything, and you've been through a lot.
Mhm.
I've been lawsuits, all is easier and a piece of cake compared to something like that.
Yeah, yeah, it is. I wouldn't wish that upon anybody. And obviously I still work a lot with cancer today, but like it is something unreal. I mean, one of the best things I did was go through therapy, right? Even though I was 19, technically an adult, my mom passed away in hospice, and they whisked me away to a therapy room. And I did therapy for a year, and it was the best thing possible. Hence why I can tell you today, it's okay that my dad grieved differently than me,
Yeah.
right? He wasn't around. He kept busy.
He tried to avoid it because of the pain.
I mean, it had to be horrible.
Yeah.
Um, and so, to process it that way, right, is remarkable.
Yeah.
I think to be able to do the makeup, shop for a casket, um, and talk about it. I mean, I had a process, right? It took me a long time. The fact that I haven't cried yet, it's that's a process.
Yeah, exactly.
But it definitely had built resiliency. So to your point of like how it's impacted me today, for sure. I mean, do I brush some things off that might bother people much more? Yeah. I try to process things. Even in my world of recruiting, I remember a fellow recruiter like, "Why aren't you that upset, that we lost this deal?" And it's like, well, let me tell you the ways why I'm not that upset, right? There's a lot. Let's learn from it. Let's be stronger. Let's right, and keep moving. We got to keep moving.
Yeah.
So all that impacts me today, even my relationships with community, my relationships professionally, my relationships with friends. Yeah, and I come from a very close family. We're
Yeah.
close
And I
because of that.
appreciate you sharing that, because I think there is
Yeah,
so
thank you.
much that we, our listeners, can learn from a story like that. So
Yeah,
thank
there's a
you.
lot. Thank you.
Now, there's something else your mom left with you as well.
Mhm.
And she told you, Monique, do not quit school.
That's right.
Do not quit school, because you were thinking about it after going through all of that trauma and
Yeah, I
all the
was.
things.
I was thinking about it. I actually had a situation with a dean. When she passed away, we had two funerals, Alabama, Virginia, and I mean her funeral in Virginia, I think it was like 400 people. Like it's not, it was productions, right?
Yeah.
And so just their network was so big, and so I missed school, I missed things, and so I was failing a geography class, I remember. And I
Who
went in,
needs
I
geography?
know, oh my God. I went,
I'm kidding, kids.
I went into the dean's office and asked for them to like, what is it? Like drop, like
Mm,
end up dropping
yeah.
way after, right? A
Yeah.
dropping time
Yeah.
frame. So it didn't count against me. And I remember that dean ripped me a new one. I was in such grief. I mean, I was grieving for my mom, and to go in there and be reprimanded, there was zero empathy.
Yeah.
Um, I don't, today, I'm not angry at that dean. the time I didn't understand it. I remember going back to my dad upset, and he like stepped in and helped me because it was irrational thinking. I think of the dean's part. It just didn't make sense.
Yeah.
But I was ready to accept it. And then I think they ended up doing something for me. But it was a fight.
Yeah.
It was a fight. And so you want to talk about quitting, right? Like it was like, wait a minute, is this going to affect every other class? So I probably should step away. But my mom, she said, do not leave school, because she had planned things out. I mean, I had birthday cards when I turned 25. I had things, she had laid it all out. And so I was driven with that and voice of hers in my head. I finished early.
Can you believe that?
So I thank the dean.
Yeah.
Whoever that was, I don't remember his name today. Thank you.
It's interesting when you look back, the people who pushed us the most, even when they were perhaps in the wrong
That's
or
right.
doing so unempathetically or irrationally.
Right.
I can pick 3 or 4 of those exact instances, and I hated them then, but I look back now and I'm like, I'm so thankful it happened that way, because it pushes you.
Right.
Tell us about the Kempington Group. You have a very interesting story on how you came to that name.
Yes.
Share that with us.
Okay, so I knew with my mom's memory, my mom's family name is Kemp, K-E-M-P. And so I knew I wanted that somewhere in there, because I know business, there are peaks and valleys. I knew statistically a business wouldn't survive even 5 years, right? Like all these things that are shared with you. So how do I get through those ups and downs? And I knew that I wanted something in memory of her. I know I originally looked up like the Kemp Group or something, and there was like, funny, it was like a recruiting firm at the time, like I think in North Carolina or something. And so I couldn't do that. But out of the 10 months of planning, the name was the last thing to fall into place. So it was a tough one. I had 2 marketing gurus, one out of DC, one out of here, that I would share my thoughts to on names. I would be on airplanes. They were like, write anything down that pops in your head, right? So I'm writing the craziest stuff down, not noting it. I call them. They're like, no, shoot me down fast. Nope, don't like that. And even the spelling, nope, don't do a play on words. Nope, don't do, I mean, it was funny. And so I'm at happy hour. Honestly, this is the organic story. I'm at a happy hour with one of my best friends and her boyfriend at the time. And he was from Arkansas. He's like a cowboy from Arkansas. And it was just the 3 of us. We're at this happy hour. And so I'm telling him this story. I'm telling him my battle of like, I can't name this company. It's like, I can't get there yet. And so he asked me, like the marketing gurus had asked me, so how do you want to represent your company? Like, how do you want to be represented and thought of? And so I tell him, I'm like, like strong, powerful, distinguished, and I'm telling him these words, and I'm kind of like royalty, I want the name to kind of exude all of that. And he's like, royalty, got hung up on royalty. He's like, royalty, royalty, royalty. Well, I think of Buckingham, Kemp. He knew the Kemp story. Okay.
Yep.
So he's like, Kempington. And we all like became elated at the table. Like, wait, Kempington. I'm like, the Kempington Group. And so he's like, have you ever looked up your family name and what it means? I'm like, no, I haven't. Right there on the spot, I look up Kemp and what it means. Mind you, in Alabama, we've got a Kemp Road. There's a lot of Kemps everywhere, right?
I was going to say Kemp is a pretty common name.
Right. And so I look it up and it literally says strong, royal. I mean, again, you cannot make this stuff up, right? Like you cannot write this. And so it was it. That was it right there. I went right on to GoDaddy at that moment in time and locked it in. Called the marketing gurus, and especially one in DC, and because he was ruthless with me. I called him. I said, the Kempington Group. He said, love it. Love it.
And that was it.
That was it.
That was almost 10 years ago, right?
Yeah. October will be 10 years.
What don't people know? Our society glamorizes being an entrepreneur.
Yeah, for sure.
And they glamorize the outcome, and you're filthy rich and you do whatever you want. You can go on vacations as much as you want. All the things that we hear because they focus on the outcome versus the process.
Right.
What do you think is most helpful for people who are either thinking about jumping into owning their own business or they're just getting started that you wish you would have known 10 years ago?
Yeah. Oh, that's a great question. There are so many things, so I hope I don't like ramble here, but I'll tell you one thing I wish I knew. I mean, there's many and I'll share those, but like one thing I wish I knew was um even though like people think it's glorious, when you're a small business, if you're a woman-owned business, I'm also a diversity woman-owned business, is I didn't know the amount of people that would try to manipulate or take advantage of you because you're a small business and they think you're thirsty, they think you're desperate. Um, and I was just never gonna go. That was never gonna fall into the entrepreneurship that way. Um, and it happened, and I share it with anyone. Done it already, and I'll continue to share it with people who want to start their own business. Is there are those people. They will be there. They will try to, get a lot for nothing from you because they think you're desperate trying to grow this business. And I would recommend don't ever fall for it. Don't stand your ground. Know your value, know your worth. And as long as you stick by that value, you can get through those things because those people will come to you. But like I embraced it, I mean, at first I was like upset with it, but I embraced it quickly because it almost became like a boxing match for me. Like, no, you're not going to knock me out.
Yeah.
You're not going to do that. I demand the same level of respect that a recruiting firm that's been around for 10 plus years, that's a major player in this organization. I deserve the same level of respect. You would never do that with them. And so, it came at me from multiple angles. It could have been a man that did that. It could have been a larger company that did that. It could have been, all these things that they just did not see me with that same value. So I wish I knew that going in to have my kind of guns up there.
Yeah.
But I'm glad it happened the way it did.
And that will happen in every industry.
That will happen in every
People
industry.
will see a small business and they will automatically make assumptions. You have the added assumptions, woman-owned business, diversity-owned business, all of these caricatures that sometimes some people build.
Yeah.
And so they will try to take advantage of you.
Always.
But
yeah.
you hit something that I think is so important for all of us to remember, not only when you're getting started out, but always. But when you're getting started out is when it's hardest. Know your value and stick to your guns.
That's right.
Now, if you're going out into the market and the marketplace is telling you someone's going to, let's use a product, will pay $10. Don't think you're so good if you don't have any competitive advantages to charge $1,000. You've got to be realistic. But the point is, if you know your value, do not back down.
That's right.
And it took me a while to learn that. And you do sometimes have to do things where you have to compress your margins a little bit to grow. But that doesn't mean you lose money, and that doesn't mean you sacrifice your morals, faith, family, who you are.
100% right.
Never do that.
I mean, you're affecting a lot of things when you do that. I'll tell especially in my industry, new recruiting firms, you're undercutting the market.
Yeah, that's another great point.
You want to do this and give this for 5% of a fee, or 10%, like you're undercutting the market. Don't do that. You started your business for a reason. So live to that value, right? Like, so that's one thing. I think that another thing is you don't realize, I tell people this starting a business, you are a walking target.
And what do you mean by that?
Yeah, my old boss at the boutique firm really taught me this, like liability, right? You hold a lot of liability owning a company. So, how do you want to represent yourself? How do you want to treat people? No matter what, you own a business, and businesses can be attacked for any, right? So, that's something that keeps business owners up, at night, is like, you're trying to do right by everybody, right? In the industry, and you're trying to do right ethically, but you're a business. Anything can go wrong. And I'm in the recruiting business, right? So we have to be very careful, like what we say, what we do, what we put in writing, because I just think any business owner, no matter what the industry is, you're vulnerable, right? You're a walking target all the time.
And your competitors know that.
Yeah.
In every single industry, your competitors know that you are a walking target.
Yeah.
And a lot of times I've seen it in a million different founder stories. We've seen it with a lot of small companies, and some people fold and other people who have that resilience, who have that fighting, never quit mentality, succeed and dominate, use that to their advantage. But your competitors know that that's the case.
Yeah.
And so just expect it no matter what industry you're in.
Yeah, that's right. That's right. Some of the fundamentals for me, learning from my dad just pounds it in my head even to this day. I mean, here I'm on almost year 10, is be 100% honest. Do it 100% honest. I mean, everything from your back end accounting to your ops, to your documentation, to how you treat people, to how you hire, to how you fire, to all the things. Be honest. And so, I mean, I do think some people go into business not realizing if you're just more honest and authentic, you will be rewarded, right? And so I think that's a big thing that a lot of people need to know.
Why do you think that's, especially in this area in Scottsdale in the Phoenix Valley? I shouldn't say just here because it's everywhere. You've been all over the country. I've had businesses in multiple parts of the country. There is this idea that if you put up a facade or if you pretend to be something that you are not, that is the best way to do business. Set aside business, even interact human to human.
Yeah.
Why do you think that's the case when everybody yearns for authenticity?
Yeah.
Everybody yearns to just be able to be themselves and they don't have to put up this facade when you're at a business event or when you're going out for whatever it is. Why does it happen so much then, Monique?
I don't know. And I agree with you. I see it so much. And, I don't know the why. I do believe it's the root of the person at the end of the day. I do think insecurities within people, they overcompensate, right? When they have insecurities. I really will chuck it up to that. And so, right, how do you get through those insecurities? You overcompensate in these other areas, right? And some people are about keeping up with the Joneses, right? Like, I don't know why. I think that goes back to some probably childhood or things that are important to them that, I, I I was lucky enough, like I said, to have parents. And I tell this story very infrequently, but I was so lucky to have parents that were exposed to some amazing things, right, in their careers and people that I got to be exposed to. But they would tell me every time we'd leave these stellar events or really distinguished people that a lot of people know who they are, they would just constantly tell me, this isn't the real world. This isn't the real world. That phrase, everybody's, what stinks. I like literally, my dad taught me that phrase.
Bless their hearts.
Because that's what it was like, okay, you see all this, drive home, not the real world. And I know that grounded me. And I didn't see my parents put on the facades, right? I would literally see them do all the great things, all the recognition my dad would get. And at the end of the day, he kept true to himself in those situations. And then at home on the couch or with his family, like it never changed. So I literally try to be that way. And I think anybody that knows me would agree and say, Monique's always going to be, I'm the same in every situation. I actually like putting out the vulnerabilities and the authenticity more because I honestly think that's when I turn the lights on. I'll tell you, I turned on my LinkedIn, right? Went down to the Arizona Corporation Commission. A day later, they approved me. And I changed my LinkedIn. The influx of people, the influx of support that I made my first placement in 2 weeks. Okay, I don't know anybody that's done that.
Yeah.
But like 2 weeks, I still have the invoice up on my desk today. I stare at it like
I
it's
like
that piece of paper is looking raggedy, but it's
a great
still
memory.
I believe it's because I've always presented myself in my authentic way, right? It's okay to be vulnerable. It's okay to be like, this has been a horrible business owner week. Like, it's okay.
Yeah.
Like, you know what? People ask me how I'm doing. It's rough. It's a rough day, or it's a great day, or I don't know. I've been to come back and it's been through Monday through Friday. And it's like, okay, it is what it is.
Yeah.
I think if we share those stories more, people will support you because they know that you're authentic.
And that's why it surprises me that it doesn't happen more. And part of what we talk about on this podcast is this exact thing, because everybody wants it. In the long run, it's far more beneficial to business.
Yeah.
Not that that's not the reason you're doing it. I think you hit it on the head. The core of the individual
I think so. I think it's the core of the individual.
is
And I
what
think
determines that.
pride, ego, all these things,
Yeah.
it's just what's important to everybody. That stuff's not important to me. I will always show up how I am. And
One of the things that I think a lot of people don't understand about being an owner, a business owner, until you experience it, is the volatility, the emotional highs and the emotional lows.
Yes.
The highs are very high, the lows are very lows, and there's not a lot of even keel in between weeks. And I talk about this on basically every podcast with every guest because I think it is something that is so important. One of those vulnerable things that we need to talk about and be realistic with when people are thinking about going into business or they're experiencing it. The human psyche is not made to go from 1,000 to negative 1,000 back to 1,000 within a 1 or 2 day time period, all in the same week, naturally. How have you found yourself most successfully dealing with that type of volatility that is inherent in owning your own company?
Yeah. I mean, we kind of talked about it earlier with the journey of my mom. That journey is volatile, right? Anyone who's gone through a cancer journey, you have hope. You hold on to so much hope, and then it's disappointment. Then there's hope. Then there's disappointment, right? So the fluctuation there, I truly believe I still carry that resiliency from that today, and through these almost 10 years of having the Kempington Group. I think first of all, I do believe the higher being is always looking out, and these situations are presented to myself or my team for a reason. If I didn't have those folks who try to take advantage of me and diminish my value and try to undercut me to pay us for services, if I didn't have that happen, I wouldn't have been as strong of an owner today. If we didn't have the pandemic happen with the whole world shut down, I wouldn't have been as strong of an owner today. 2023 actually was very weird of a year for us in recruiting. It's not just myself, other recruiting owners will tell you that. Probably worse than 2020.
Really?
Yeah, 23 was just odd year. And so if I didn't have that, I wouldn't be as strong of an owner today. So the joke in my world is like, what's happening this week? Right? We live literally like week by week, maybe even days sometimes. But I've done it for so long that it's like we're going in a boxing ring ready for the punches. And where's it going to come from today? But not in a negative way where you're like waiting for something bad to happen.
Yeah, I was going to ask, how do you keep
negative.
how do you keep a positive mentality with that scenario?
Yeah, it's like I'm not going to be given something I can't handle, right?
Yeah.
So what's my lesson? How you make it positive is what's my lesson? And people close to me know this. I talk about this, called the Oprah effect. When it is really getting tough or we're at a low of for whatever reason, whatever happened that day, it's like, I get to do this. I reckon anybody should say that phrase to themselves. I get to do this. I get to be taken advantage of today because I'm a business owner. And they're going to do that to me because
I
I'm
haven't
out
thought
there.
of it that way.
I get to do this. I call it the Oprah effect, and it is so true. I've taught it to a friend of mine who's a recent business owner, and she's like, Monique, I have your voice screaming in my head. I get to do this, right? So when she has conflict with her employees, she's like, I get to have this difficult conversation today. When I'm on the call with a client and it may be an uncomfortable conversation, if I got to deliver the news the candidate they made an offer to is not going to accept it, and we worked months on this, I get to make this call because what's my alternative?
Yeah, that's a great way to think about it.
And so you ask me how I get through it, just keep saying I get to do this. There is some crazy, comforting feeling when you're in the midst of that and you go, I get to do this. I get to have this conversation. I get to have this hard meeting. I get to, because other than that, we wouldn't be there.
Yeah.
What's my alternative? I could not be a business owner, not have this success and, be doing something I don't really want to do.
That's exactly right. I look at a lot of, even my generation and some of the younger generations, and people who listen to the podcast will say, I always beat down on the younger generations. That's not what I'm doing. That's not my intent. But I think there's a lesson to be learned that as I look at society, and perhaps this is because of technology, the ability of different generations to confront conflict and get through the other side without freaking out or losing all sense of emotional intelligence
That's right.
seems to be waning.
I know it does. It really does.
What's going on?
Oh my, it really does. I would listen to my dad back in his heyday, and they would go off on each other, cuss each other out, and then be at dinner having drinks the next day. That's how I saw, professional. It's not personal. It's a professional conversation. Now, maybe we can't cuss like they did in the 80s, 90s, but
Probably best not to,
right,
yes.
Exactly. However, can we have a direct, candid, open conversation where our emotional intelligence is still, like you said, very strong, but it's not personal. And so there is a shift right now. You're looking at the younger generations. And I mean, even me, I'm Gen X, right? Like, it's like,
how do you deal with that as a recruiter? Because you must be seeing this in your candidates.
Oh, yeah, for sure.
When you're interviewing them and prepping them for a job, you can see the lack of, confidence, emotional intelligence, ability to hear no, or you're not going to be a good fit. And they either fall to mush like a little puddle and you got to pick them up like a puppy dog, or they just, a switch is flipped and they go off the deep end.
I know it is a weird transition time right now, because what you have is think about who's doing the interviews. So I kind of have the candidates that are from this young generation, right? Fresh on the scene or newer. And then who do have a sense of entitlement. I don't know if they had the same put in the grit, the hours, the sweat, the blood, the tears that like my generation
It's
had.
not there anymore.
It's not there, but they're being hired by my generation, right? And so there's like an interesting dichotomy that's happening.
Why do you think that is? And what do you think the ramifications are? And do you think it's a good thing or a bad thing? And you're particularly qualified to speak on this because you are in HR and recruiting.
Yeah, right. Yeah. I mean, I have a couple thoughts as I sit in the seat that I do to see all this, right? I mean, I see the wrongs on both sides. I think, both sides got to give the other a little bit of grace, right? With, I do think if the youngest generation's coming into an interview, I mean, we tell professionals with 10 plus years of experience when we prep them for an interview, know your audience. Know your audience. If you're talking to a CFO, what does a CFO want to hear? These are professional people, well in the game, right? Of work experience. So, like, what does your audience want to hear? What does a CFO want to hear? You know what you have a guess, right? They're going to want to know numbers, successes, adds to the revenue, things like that, right? Or if you're talking to a COO, what does a COO want to hear? They want to hear about the operational excellence, right? And all the growth mindset, all these things. So I think going back to the two generations, I think the young generation need to still know their audience. I don't know who's teaching them in the world of like when you go in for an interview. I think if they have a better understanding of who their audience is, which could be my generation, then you're going to know, well, what does that generation think? They need to probably start researching the generation, the mindset, not so much title, but the generational mindset. So if they're interviewing with me, right? Okay, she's a Gen Xer. Okay, she's going to want to show that I've put in work, that I've done my due diligence, that, right? Whatever the drive, that I'm willing to do the work, like all these things. On the flip side, I think the person that is my generation interviewing, the young generation, need to know their audience. You have to have some sort of relatability a little bit, right? Because we got to understand what they want to hear and what's going to attract them to our organization. Because remember, they got to still sell an opportunity to that candidate. So how do we speak their language a little bit more? I just think a better understanding of who you're talking to a little bit. So they shift maybe the interview questions a little bit. Maybe the storytelling's done differently. This is where I'll go back to storytelling. I don't care what generation you're in, mine or older or younger. There is if the story is told, that is going to be more impactful. The young love a good story, right? Inspirational story. to want to work there and work towards. Older generation love telling stories. Tell the stories. They have a lot to tell.
It's a match made in heaven.
I know.
But that doesn't always happen. That connection doesn't
It doesn't always happen. And here I'm preaching, telling the story and the power of the story. When we think of the generational gap, it's going to go right back to me, to that story.
Yeah.
Tell it differently, interview differently, have the conversation differently, I think, on both sides.
Would you say it's fair to characterize the younger generation?
No.
Where they are,
I know.
Let me finish. Do you think it's fair? They are probably the first generation. I don't even know if this is true, but I'm going to say where they are not, I will say the level of motivation that money gives them is far less than we have seen from any of the previous generations. Would that be a fair characterization?
Oh, I would say yes. I would say if I had to really put the weight on it, it's going to be less about money.
Yeah. And this generation, that is a concept
Mm-hmm.
that blows their mind.
Mm-hmm.
You work 180 hours a week, here Monday through Sunday, sacrifice family, friends, all the things. You get one vacation week a year, but you're going to get this big, shiny paycheck.
Mm-hmm.
Do you believe that's perhaps where the dichotomy is? Corporate America is starting to figure that out. This group is saying, you guys are clueless because, we value our lives and we don't want to work away our lives like our parents and our grandparents did. And we want to have the opportunity to work remote. And if we want to go on a vacation to spend time and get memories, we want to do that.
Mm-hmm.
And if you're not going to offer that, I don't really give two rats rear ends about that $200,000 or $300,000.
Yeah.
Don't you believe that's part of where this whole language barrier is?
I mean, I think it's part of it. I think that's a huge part of it. I think there's also, if you really want to hone in on the money, right? I think there is a little discrepancy, right? The reason why they want the money is different, right? The young generation, because they are still demanding money, right? But sometimes we just talk about value, right? Well, what's your value? You want to come out of college making
$100,000
$100,000, and you're standing firm on that. But what are you delivering? What are the deliverables? So there's, even within that, I see that discrepancy.
Mm-hmm.
So even though they may not be motivated by money, they seem to think, this is my value and I should get it no matter what, which is very different than my generation thinks with that, right? So then, that has us rolling our eyeballs. We're like, what are we doing? That doesn't make sense. You had to earn that 100K, right? You should be happy with 50.
Yeah.
Right?
Well,
but then that's
my mindset. That's
right.
As an entrepreneur, it's like, what? Why in the world do you think coming out of college you should get $100,000?
Yeah.
You have no experience. You're going to be getting lots of opportunity to learn. You got to, put in your stripes, and that just is a whole different mindset.
It's different.
How do you think AI and technology changes all this?
Oh, it's a conversation all the time. I mean, even internally, we're playing with AI constantly, testing to see, how that impacts my industry. Although we're relational recruiting, we'll never be doing high volume, customer service reps or something. We're relational. So I don't know if AI can ever replace that. However, we play with AI on the back end from an ops perspective, just to see how that can help us operationally. As far as AI in general, with just hiring and the job market, I think it depends on what you're looking for, right? So if you get these bigger organizations with massive customer service, centers, or tech support centers, right? AI, I think, is going to be huge in the production of sending out, almost pretending to be the recruiting arm of the company, and the messaging out, and that back and forth of getting talent, sending the thank yous and sending we'd like to set you up for an interview, right? All that stuff. I think it can really help them. But then what does that mean for the people who are doing it today, right? Does it replace them? Does it complement them?
Do you think AI will replace executive recruiters? Do you think that
not executive recruiters?
Okay.
No, I don't think so.
And why?
Because typically on the executive recruitment side, it's very relational still, meaning we have to have a relationship with the decision makers, with the leadership there. If it's even a new organization, right? A startup or a next phase organization or early growth, you really need the relational recruiting, because what they discussed on Monday could be different by Wednesday.
Yeah.
And we got to be part of those conversations, right? To be able to adapt with them so that we can course correct our searches, right? If we're coming in. I think that human part is still necessary. I think AI can replace recruiters when it's on a massive production scale, for sure. I think it could one day.
So maybe more blue collar hiring versus white collar hiring.
I think so. Blue collar, or like I said, customer service, where, or maybe can help with a certain leg of the process.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
But I don't think it can ever fully replace. Like, who interviews? I mean, companies still are all about work culture.
Yeah. 100%.
Who's going to do that screening?
Well,
the AI?
Yeah.
Like,
it's scary to see what AI is doing.
That's right.
But what I often think about is, we have very similar mentalities. The old school mentality. I'll call it the old school mentality. And it drives me nuts that people don't have this work ethic anymore. But I, in my old curmudgeon self, am learning you got to bend a little bit, and you got to realize, well, you might want it to be one way, but here's the reality. That's not the way it is. And, you're going to have to give that flexibility and offer some type of remote opportunities. But because if you don't, you're just going to be sitting there. It's already hard enough in the workforce, right?
That's right.
You can't hardly find competent, capable workers in this day and age, no matter what industry you're in. So if you can make a few shifts to what you're looking for and what you're willing to sacrifice, you can maybe get some of those people. Because there are the younger generation's ability, I see with my nieces and nephews, to understand technology, to understand social media, to understand the marketing side, to understand what their consumer group, who is being passed down hundreds of trillions of dollars of wealth. Let's not forget, we're having the greatest generational transfer of wealth over the next 10 to 15 years. And who is that going to? This group that everybody says that I bash, that I'm not actually bashing. And they make decisions and purchase things and make hiring decisions and who they want to work with in a completely different way.
That's right.
But they will control a tremendous amount of monetary value. So when you think about that, them being the consumers, and them doing the hiring, what do you think about as a recruiter?
Oh, it will be entertaining and interesting. Now
you're like, I'm going to be out and retired by that time, so I don't want to worry about that.
Oh my goodness! I mean, we do work. There are hiring managers that are 32 years old. 30 years old. Certain industries, right? You tend to have leadership quite young, and we work with that. And I think that's more education for them. I think they listen to us. We have to educate a little bit on. They didn't have a lot of time to hire people, right? They don't really know. I think some of them lose sight of, like, you can't ask that question. You can't do that. It's a violation. You can't ask that question.
There's a law against that, by the way.
Right.
It's only been in place for like 40 years, but
right. But then there's a lot of the young leaders.
I bet you have some interesting conversations.
I need to write a memoir,
Yeah,
honestly, Andrew. I don't know why I don't release a book. New York Times bestseller, top seller. But I because we're seeing that more and more. I mean, we are working with them. And so and they're hiring, and they're, like I said, they're 30. And so, but the other thing is they're also very, I look at the society, that generation, there's more, like, everything's fluid. Everything is, so I talk about how some violate the things, but then so many are respectful to, pronouns and, things like that. Like, we want to hire, they're very strategic with, we don't have enough diversity, and we're, some places fight for that. They're already proactive with, as they're hiring, bringing on diverse populations to come work for them. And they're getting very strategic with what those are. Like, we don't have enough LGBTQ. We don't have enough, people of color in our leadership teams. And it's just like, that wouldn't have been years and years ago, right? Like, it wasn't, they're so forward thinking with let's do all the things we're
Don't you
supposed to
think
do.
we can go too far forward? Let's talk about DEI because it's a hot topic.
Mhm.
And we saw society go one way. And now we're seeing a lot of organizations, Target being the latest example of merchandise they're pulling off the shelves because consumers spoke and they pushed something too far for what their consumers were. Don't you think, and I myself believe we have gone way too far. And I actually think it's a slap in the face to hire someone because of A, B, C, or D.
Mhm.
That is saying that I'm not hiring you because you're qualified and because of what you've accomplished and your talents. I'm hiring you because I have to meet a quota, or I'm hiring you because you fit a certain box that has nothing to do with necessarily something you've decided. It was either you were born with that skin color, you were born with that gender, or A, B, C, D, Y. What is your perspective on that?
Yeah, I mean, I hear a lot. At the end of the day, we cannot. We're a recruiting partner. We have to maintain, like, you can't ask me to look for a certain
Yeah.
culture
Yeah.
and then I'm screening. Like, we can't do that, right? At the end of the day, we know that in recruiting. We have to be completely unbiased.
Mm-hmm.
And just, you tell us you need A through Z of expertise, that's what we're going to go for. I think the requests, that we may get is, if you happen to find out, if they are, like, we need more women.
Mm-hmm.
Let's just start that.
Yeah.
We need more women. We have too many men in leadership, not looking good, right? The same thing applies there, right? What are we going by? A name, right? Like,
That puts you in a very precarious situation.
So I will always say, to my recruiters is, just go off the expertise. And I'll tell a client the same thing. Like, we technically can't.
We got to go off
We
qualifications.
got to go off qualifications.
Which is the way it should be.
I can't ask some of these questions. Like, how am I supposed to ask somebody's LGBTQ?
Yeah.
We can't do that.
Yeah.
Even race, I could at least see a photo, maybe. But we don't go to personal social media other than LinkedIn, obviously, because we work within LinkedIn. Mm-hmm. But we don't want that. We don't want that record. I do not want that technology. Like, if you were to do some IT forensics, we do not want.
You talk about liability.
That's right.
Ooh.
Right. We avoid it. We're going to go completely whatever LinkedIn has and whatever we find out from conversation or from referral. But the point is, you just can't ask questions, right? You really, this day and age, you can't go by names a lot of times either. So
here's the thing. It shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't matter.
It shouldn't matter. Hire someone based off the qualifications and the things they've accomplished. And I guarantee you will get the swath of society just focusing on that. You will.
Yeah. I mean, some companies do have some serious unbalances, right?
Sure.
But I think the big part. I think most are looking at big picture things. Like, even
I think they have imbalances because they're doing the opposite. So let's be very clear. They're not hiring from the select group. They're going the opposite of what we're talking about, which is not appropriate either.
Yeah, right. Exactly. Right, exactly. Or, I've had leaders that are like, wait, why is my base, like, at production level predominantly, let's say, of a certain culture? Mm-hmm. But I go look at the pathways up. Why? Putting it on them, going, hold up, they're in our company. Why are we not creating a pathway to send them up to leadership? I almost think like looking at the company within itself to maybe look and see, mm-hmm. Are we not creating the pathways? The people are there. Why are we not creating the pathways up, right? There's all sorts of scenarios. Yeah. But I think a lot of companies, they're not asking us for the impossible. They're not asking us to be, to discriminate. They're not, I think a lot of them are doing, I think, smarter things, I think, in the sense of, like, starting with, well, even the vendors that they partner with, mm-hmm. Diversifying your vendors, right? I'm a diversity vendor, mm-hmm. in a sense, right? So there's companies that have literally used me because of me. Yep. And so they want to diversify their vendors. That's one thing.
Doesn't that offend you? Doesn't that offend you that they're picking the Kempington Group simply because of the color of your skin and not because of the approach you talked about earlier? Isn't that offensive? They should be picking you, and they will pick you because of the human approach you take, not just because you're a diversity vendor. What?
Yeah, I don't. You know, it's funny. I don't think anyone's just worked with me just because.
Okay.
I think they've been like introduced to me. They've done. I think if you pull up LinkedIn, my LinkedIn, I would hope it speaks for itself.
Exactly.
They could just see. Oh, wait. And she's also right. So I think I look at it as it's a bonus for them in the sense of like, wait a minute, we do want to diversify our vendors. It's not just because I don't. At least I'm not aware where it's been like, oh, here's a minority owned company, use them just because they're minority owned. I still have to prove myself. I'd still have to, like, if they look me up, I'd have to be something that fills that. Right. Fills everything else. My expertise have to be right. So I guess I've never felt that way.
Good.
But I think a lot of companies are doing the right thing. Like, if you want, hires that are, if you don't have enough of one group or another group, well, then associate yourself with those groups so that you really learn people.
Yes.
And then you can go, this group, whatever, produces a lot, maybe a college, maybe a certain type of university that is a certain demographic. And you're really, really building that relationship. And then you're able to say, you know what, we like to recruit from that college because we know exactly the education and the expertise they're giving those students. So when they get out to the real world, we want to take them and continue them in that industry, right? Like associating yourself with groups so you really learn and educate, I think, is a good way to do it, right?
I agree. What I think sometimes society misses is different cultures have different things they like to enjoy. So I'm going to give this example, and people are going to freak out about this, but it's just a fact based on my short life's history. Okay, the Indian culture, they prioritize math, science, engineering, and coding. They're really good at it. And they also prioritize medicine. I'm not saying that we don't, but they have, if I'm raised only learning math or only learning coding, I'm going to be really good at coding. And some cultures, that's what they focus on. Other cultures focus on music and art. So you're naturally going to see certain cultures represented to a larger degree in different industries simply based on the cultural differences that of values that are important within those different cultures. Doesn't that make sense?
Mm-hmm.
And so if I try to take, squeeze, okay, I'm going to use this as an example, but you can put me in the NFL if you want. Okay. I'm going to be dead within a week. Like it's just, I don't have the skill set. I just am never, you can ask me to be a doctor and I'm just not intelligent enough to be a doctor. I can tell you that, right? You don't want me operating on you. I'm not saying that there aren't white males that can't do that, but I think certain humans can do certain things better just culturally speaking, or what they grew up. And so when you talk about a company where you're not seeing that progression up the ladder, I think it happens for two reasons, and I'm curious on your number one. Maybe it's not happening for nefarious reasons, but maybe it's not happening because what I want as I move up is very different and what's important to me. And so I'm going to work for a different company that more aligns with what's important to me and my values. Is that a fair assessment?
I mean,
and I know
this is a big topic. This is a whole nother podcast topic.
It is. So,
but no, I think let's just say I've seen companies do this smarter over the last few years, right? Instead of, like you said, checking a box does none of us any good.
Yes.
Right? Not fair to the candidate, not fair to the other employees, just not fair to the culture they're trying to represent. It's just not fair to anybody, just checking a box. So what I've seen is just more intelligent approaches. Like I mentioned, if you want to get those circles of people in your organization, then mingle with the circles. So
figure out what's important to them.
Be in the community, in those communities, learn people, learn the talent that's out there in those communities. Entrench yourself in that. And these companies are doing it smarter, but that doesn't get a lot of recognition. That doesn't get talked about.
I'm glad you're saying that. I'm so glad you're saying that, because I think that's the logical, rational approach. Actually taking an interest and caring and getting involved.
Yeah,
immersing yourself,
Mhm.
as opposed to some edict from top down just because they're trying to fit some national requirement, not even a requirement, just
Yeah.
feel good philosophy.
Right. I mean, or the optics, right? They want the optics to look.
Exactly.
And although optics are important, how did you get there?
Yeah.
And if you got there in a
Great
very
question.
authentic way, because you truly want to build relationships with the multiple diverse communities,
Yeah.
if you're doing it the right way, it will be successful.
Yeah.
And so I think that mind shift has
begun.
Yeah.
I think there's a lot
Yeah.
more work, but you hit it. How did you get there? Sure, you're there, but how did you get there?
Mhm.
That's a great point.
Mhm.
Monique, you have been incredibly gracious with your time. We've covered a lot of topics.
Thank you.
Is there anything that we haven't talked about that you think's particularly important that you want to share with me, our listeners, on anything we've covered or anything we haven't covered?
Ooh, this could bleed to another hour.
Let's go.
No, I just think, one thing we didn't cover was, and maybe I just didn't even mention it when you asked about one thing, if I knew beforehand, was I just think the importance as a business owner, as any leader in our community, is what you do in the community with it, right? Like, I learned starting in 2012 of just how I marry those two, right? Passion, cancer is passion to me. It's near and dear to my heart, clearly. Children, women, uplifting girls, in this community, be an example of, how can I be an example? I'm a female, right? How can I be an example to other girls? I'm also someone of color. How can I be an example so they can see someone that looks like them? So, all the things is, how do we really fight for things in our community and build the power of our network that we have built and the people that work with us and believe in us and trust us? How do we use that to give back, and do something bigger and better? For me, it's I don't need to just be on a board to be on a board. We have a lot of serial community people that are
Yeah, we do.
everything.
Yes.
Like, what do you focus
could
on?
not agree. I'm like, why are you on that many boards? Like you can't
Right.
possibly be effective on that many
Right.
boards.
And it comes back to the story. Like,
Yeah.
if anyone asks you, what does Monique like with the community or do for the community? They will give you that answer.
Yeah.
Cancer. Her mom died of cancer. I have a story. I think doing a good job and better job, I guess, of telling that story. But what can we do in the community more? And everyone's idea of that looks different. Some people love the grassroots. Some people like to be way in the back and not be seen, heard, and just want to give money. Hey, all of it's great.
Yeah.
But I think that's one of the things I'd love for some of us leaders to come together more intentionally, not at an event because we're all there at a charity event, but more intentionally. And maybe this is an idea. I should start some groups that we all meet, but more intentionally of like, how do we put all our powers and our minds together to do some things great, in different ways, right? So I don't know. I'd like to add that.
Yeah,
Like to build that more.
I think setting an example, which is what is so important, especially for these younger generations.
Yeah.
Because I think it's getting harder and harder to find good examples in this day and age, especially with social media has just, there's so many ways for our kids, nieces, nephews, grandkids to access just not good examples
I
on
don't even
social
know.
media.
Like, can you imagine? I didn't grow up with it. Like,
I'm so thankful we didn't.
me too.
I am so
Me too.
thankful we didn't, because it messes with the development of the mind. It
Yeah.
messes with security, confidence. I mean, all teenagers, but teenage girls in this day and age are just, we are doing such a disservice in our society by not controlling or having a better understanding of the impact that has on kids and confidence and all of this fake stuff. Because 90% of it that is there is this glamorized, idealized, fake garbage. And then you have our kids trying to be something that's not real in the first place.
Well, think of how it's affecting adults, our own friends.
Yeah.
So let alone kids. But you asked why earlier. Why is there so much like this facade?
That's a great point.
Social media is definitely manipulating adults' minds.
Yes.
For sure.
100%. And my concern with AI is that could potentially get
fair point.
a whole nother podcast ever. Monique, this has been
Thank you,
so
Andrew.
incredibly fun. Thank you
Thank
so much
you.
for taking the time and coming
Thank
in
you
today.
for letting me tell
Appreciate
my
it.
story.
Thank you for listening to the Andrew Holland Podcast. Never miss an episode by subscribing to and liking our YouTube channel, The Andrew Holland Podcast, and by following and liking the show on your favorite audio platforms. Be sure to connect with us on X, formerly Twitter, A Holland Podcast. That's A Holland Podcast. So you can interact with Andrew, the team, and our guests throughout the week. Thank you again so much for listening. Have a great day, and we'll talk again soon.